Top 10 Most Cold-Hearted Criminals of All Time. Let's face it, we all harbor a small amount of morbid interest. Because of this, serial murderer literature often has bizarre elements. Even when you want to turn away, you just can't. The utter butchery and horrors that humans are capable of are unfathomable. But if there's one thing you'll notice, it's that serial killer virtually universally experienced abuse as children. Here are some of history's coldest-hearted criminals. Number 10. Abdullah Catlay. Abdullah Catlay, a Turkish murderer, rose to prominence as the Grey Wolves commander, a far-right nationalist organization. He and other group members murdered 7 students in 1978 whom they thought were communist revolutionaries. The Grey Wolves stormed the flat of the students, who belonged to the left-leaning Turkish Workers' Party, expecting to find firearms, but they were unarmed. However, the extremists nonetheless tied them up and shot them. Mehmet Ali Agca, a member of Catlay's Grey Wolves, attempted to kill Pope John Paul II in 1981. Agca had been imprisoned for the murder of a journalist 2 years prior, and Catlay had freed him. Some people think Catlay planned the Pope's murder attempt to get paid. Following this, the Turkish intelligence service MIT hired Catlay. He attacked the Armenian liberation movement, and MIT paid him heroin in exchange. Catlay spent time in prison for cocaine trafficking in France in 1984 and Switzerland in 1988. Number 9. John Childs. One of the most active contract killers in British history was John Childs. The only time Childs chuckles, according to a crime writer who spoke with him, is when he discusses murder. In November 1974, Childs's first contract was signed. Childs used a submachine gun to murder George Brett, a merchant, for £1,800. To get rid of Brett's 10-year-old son as a witness, he also killed him. Fred Sherwood, the manager of a nursing home, became Childs's next victim and paid him £4,000. Before shooting Sherwood, Childs clubbed him to death with a hammer. None of Childs's victims' bodies have ever been discovered. He asserted that after dismembering the remains, he torched them in his living room after processing them through an industrial mincer. When Childs was apprehended, he said he had been working for Terry Pinfold and with Harry McKenna. Number 8. Sretko Kalinik. The Zeman clan was arguably the most potent criminal gang in Southeast Europe between 2000 and 2003. The organization was a branch of the Serbian mafia and was known for its love of nicknames. They included crooks with the names The Fool and The Rat. Seko the Beast Kalinik was their bloodiest member. Due in part to his penchant for mutilating corpses, Kalinik acquired his moniker. He was also prepared to murder a friend. As a retaliation strike ordered by another Zeman clan member, he claimed to have killed Branko Jeftovic in 2004 out of friendship and not for money. Number 7. Christopher Flannery. Mr. Rent a Kill is how Australians refer to him, Christopher Dale Flannery. He started breaking into cars and breaking into homes when he was just 14 years old. He was getting paid tens of thousands of dollars to kill individuals by the time his career was over. In 1979, Flannery secured employment as a bouncer at a Melbourne nightclub, where he developed the connections required to transition into contract murdering. Roger Wilson, a lawyer who Flannery allegedly murdered for $35,000 in 1980, was one of his first clients. Wilson was taken hostage by him, who then led him into the wilderness before shooting him. Never was the corpse discovered after being tried and found not guilty. Flannery was taken into custody for a second murder as he left the court. The case eventually collapsed because Flannery got a fictitious medical certificate declaring him unfit for trial. The physician who signed the certificate ultimately served time in prison for tampering with the legal system. Number 6. Frank Schweiz. The German Frank, one of the most notorious hit men in Chicago history, is Schweiz. He was described as a cold-blooded, tough killer who would murder anyone, if instructed to by a former officer of the city's law enforcement. Before killing his victims, he was known to inform them that what goes around, comes around. He was the main suspect in more than a dozen attacks, yet he was never found guilty of any murders, though he was charged with plenty of other crimes. In his appearance on the reality TV program Mob Wives Chicago in 2012, his daughter Nora Schweiz criticized her father's image as being unfair. She had his body unearthed that year to make sure it was unquestionably him, since she thought the FBI might have stolen his real body after he passed away in 2008. Number 5. Bernard Hunwick. According to some estimates, Bernard Hunwick, sometimes known as Barry the Bear, had 300 kills by 1982. Even the most cautious totals are close to 100. Despite this, he was only found guilty of one murder, which occurred in 1999. He was imprisoned for both planning and carrying out a murder. He was detained by an FBI agent working undercover after being paid to kill a narcotics dealer. Hunwick was wed to a former Playboy bunny who was also a pot dealer. A former boss remarked, "I've never seen somebody as tough or vicious as Barry Hunwick," characterizing the hitman's willingness to beat someone until they were close to death before continuing with his work. He was once heard on tape explaining how he would pummel a man's face before stuffing broken glass in his mouth. Number 4. Teenage killers in Mexico. Rosalio Reta received between $10,000 and $50,000 for each murder when he served as a hit assassin for Mexico's Zetas drug organization. He is currently incarcerated and is thought to have killed 30 people. Reta's story is alarming because of his age rather than the cash or number of hits. At the age of barely 13, he committed his first murder. By the time he was apprehended, Reta had not even become an adult. But some situations are much more dramatic than his. At least 50 deaths for the Los Mazatlecos drug cartel were tied to Francisco Miguel N., who was captured in 2012 at the age of 16. El Nino, which translates to the boy, was his nickname, and he was skilled with both an AK-47 and a handgun. Police officers and farmers were among the people he admitted to having killed. Number 3. Rodney Chuck Collins. The most prolific living hit guy in Australia, Rodney Collins, has only been found guilty in 2 murder cases, but he is suspected in 9 more. He has several nick titles, including the Duke, Cherokee, and the Fox, thanks to his connections to almost all of the country's prominent criminals. On July 27, 1987, Collins entered the home of drug dealer Ray Abbey and his wife Dorothy Abbey while posing as a police officer and using a fake warrant. Collins arrived and locked the Abbey's kids in their rooms before killing the couple by shooting them and slicing their throats. The bodies were discovered by the kids first thing the next morning. The murders of Michael Chivella and Heather McDonald in 1990 are essentially the same tale as this one. A cut to the couple's throat caused them to be tied and slain. Number 2. Jimmy Moody. Jimmy Moody's criminal career lasted for a very long time and was rather dramatic. He started in London in the 1960s working for the Richardsons and the Crays, 2 of the most infamous gangsters in the city. He served 4 years in prison after being found guilty of manslaughter in 1968. When he was released, the world had changed. His former employers had been imprisoned. In response, he joined a group that went for armored trucks. The crew was known as the Chainsaw Gang because Moody used a chainsaw to break into the cars. Before being apprehended in 1980 and sent to Brixton Prison to await trial, he stole more than 900 pounds, 000. Together, he and IRA fighter Gerard Tuitt dug through the walls and scaled the prison roof to escape. Number 1. Fred Burke. In the criminal underground, Fred Burke was known by the simple moniker Killer. His preferred weapon was a machine gun, and he frequently used more than one victim in his attacks. In the Miraflores massacre, which occurred in Detroit in 1927, he shot and killed 3 members of a gang. It was the first time a machine gun had ever been used in a killing in the city. But the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, one of the most notorious shootings of the 1920s, is where Burke got his moniker. On February 14, 1929, Al Capone's main opponent, gangster Bugs Moran, had 7 of his accomplices murdered by 4 men posing as police officers. J. Owen May, one of the victims, was shot 17 times. Burke shot him in the head at close range with a shotgun after questioning whether he was dead. How was the video? Do you enjoy it? Tell us in our comments section below, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more updates.